Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel. Today we're beginning to look at Daniel chapter 10, which gives us the account of Daniel's fourth vision. Let's begin to read in verse 1. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a revelation was given to Daniel. Its message was true, and it concerned a great war. The understanding of the message came to him in a vision. Now, this is the fourth vision that Daniel has that's recounted for us in his book. It says it occurs in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. That would place it 2 years after the vision in chapter 9, the vision of the 70 weeks. And the year would be 536 BC. Now, the last half of Daniel, he has 4 different visions. The first one is recounted in chapter 7. That's the vision of the great kingdoms, the 4 kingdoms that will arise on the earth. And then, of course, the kingdom of God will be established when the Ancient of Days on the throne gives the kingdom to the Son of Man. And then in chapter 8, he has a second vision, which is the vision of the ram and the he-goat. Now, this is a part of the vision in chapter 7, where chapter 7 talks about the 4 great kingdoms. The vision in chapter 8 talks about the second and third of those kingdoms. That's the Medo-Persian Empire and the Greek Empire. It also talks about the little horn. And then in chapter 9, we have the vision of the 70 weeks. That's that span of time in which God unveils his plan to provide atonement and redemption for the people by the Messiah who will come and give his life as sacrifice. And then in chapter 10, we begin the 4th vision, which is the vision of a great war. Now, this vision will be told to us in chapters 10, 11, and 12. So for the last 3 chapters of the book, it's dealing with this vision of the great war. And there's a particular focus, as we'll see, on the end times and how this war culminates with the conclusion of the age, the establishment of the eternal kingdom of God. So these are the 4 visions we're going to find in Daniel. The first one in chapter 7 occurred in 553 BC, and this last one occurs around 536 BC. So it's a period of 17 years that passed from the first till the last vision. 17 years in which Daniel receives these 4 visions, giving him some insight into God's plan for his world. Now remember, the book of Daniel began in the year 605 BC. That was the year when Jerusalem came under the domination of the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar. And the first wave of exiles was taken to Babylon in that year. That's the year Daniel was carried to Babylon, 605 BC, as a teenager. And this is the last date we're given in chapter 10. And that's what almost 70 years have passed. So the book of Daniel comprises at least 70 years period of time from when Daniel is first introduced as a teenager to his 4th vision. These 7 decades, Daniel has lived in a foreign land. He's lived in a pagan land. He's lived in the land of Babylon. By this time, he's well into his 80s. We assume he was a teenager when he was first carried into Babylon, and now he's well into his 80s, an old man, but still very full of the service of God. And throughout his lifetime, he has been the one whom God has used to interpret the dreams of others and visions of others, as he interpreted the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar in the early part of the book. He also interpreted the vision of Belshazzar in the early part of the book. And then in the last half of the book, he has 4 visions of his own. So chapter 10 begins the final vision. It is of a great war. Now, this vision weighs heavily upon Daniel. Notice in verse 2 it says of chapter 10, "At that time, after I had received the vision, I, Daniel, mourned for 3 weeks. I ate no choice food. No meat or wine touched my lips. I used no lotions at all until the 3 weeks were over." So there's a heavy burden to receive this revelation of God, to see the wars that will unfold. And part of this war will be, again, he will focus on the little horn and the rise of the Antichrist. He'll again see that persecution at the end of time, but he'll also see the great victory. But there's so much there, and it weighs heavily on Daniel to receive these visions of God. Now, tomorrow we'll start looking in some detail at this fourth vision. Chapter 10 gives us the setup for the vision, how Daniel received it, and it gives us some insight into supernatural activity of God's angelic host. And then in chapter 11, we'll see the content of the vision, and then in chapter 12, we'll see the conclusion of the whole, the conclusion of the vision and the conclusion of the book of Daniel. But tomorrow we're going to begin looking in detail at chapter 10, and this is one of those places of the Bible where the veil is kind of pulled back, and we see some of the activity that goes on the supernatural level, sort of behind the scenes that often we don't see, the interaction of God's angelic host with the affairs of earth. But we'll begin to look at that tomorrow. So I hope you join us next time for our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel.